Okay, so now that we've talked about electrolytic cells, we are ready to do problems related to electrolytic cells. And we call this quantitative electrochemistry. So in quantitative electrochemistry, we can figure out how much of a chemical change. So in other words, if we're talking about plating out a substance, so a metal, so copper, for example, we can talk about how many grams of copper was produced, how many moles of copper is produced, how many atoms of copper are produced. And there's been a specific amount of current given. Okay, so we're going to talk about current here today, and then for a specific time. And time can be in seconds, time can be in minutes, time can be hours. So what I really want to do in this video is just list all the tools that you have in your toolbox. And these are things you're going to need to memorize for our next quiz, the electrochemistry quiz, and obviously for the test when we get to the end of chapter 18. All right, so here are the list of tools we want to have in our toolbox for our electrochemistry problems. The first one is known as Faraday's constant. And we want to think of Faraday's constant as a bridge. It is our bridge between electrochemistry and stoichiometry. And so what this tells us is that it tells us how many coulombs per mole of electrons. And it's a number that you're going to need to memorize. So there are 96,485 coulombs for every mole of electrons. Now, the rest of our topic is going to be derived units. Now, here's what we probably remember from first year chem is that derived units are a combination of SI units. So what this means is we can use them as conversion factors. So the first one let's talk about is one we're already familiar with. Let's talk about the volt. A volt, so if I have 1 volt, what this really means is that I have 1 joule for every 1 coulomb. Amps is also a derived unit. And so let's say I have 1 amp. The symbol for amp is my capital A here. What this really means is I have 1 coulomb for every 1 second. All right, and the last derived unit is the watt. Okay, so for some of you who've taken physics, you would have talked about watts in physics. And if I have 1 watt, what I really have is 1 joule for every 1 second. Okay. And then the other relationship we can talk about is kilowatt hours. And this is an actual conversion factor. So 1 kilowatt hour is equal to 3.6 times 10 to the 6th joules. And so we're going to use these tools that are in our toolbox for our next video, which is looking at calculations for electrolysis.